Hello, everyone, and welcome to GlugNet. This evening, we are pleased to welcome our own Sam Nasr, who will be speaking to us on Azure Speech Services. A little bit about us. We are the Greater Lansing user group for .NET developers, based out of Okemos, Michigan. Meetings are held monthly on every third Thursday, open to the public, free to attend. To find out more information about us and when the next meeting will be, our link is right there, meetup.com/glugnet. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors for the evening, NIS Technologies, for providing us this go-to-meeting session, the .NET Foundation, who helps pay some of the organization's bills, and TechSmith, our normal physical hosting site. Additionally, meetups are recorded and posted to YouTube by Sam Nasr, who's doing it all tonight. There's a link to his YouTube channel there, as well as a QR code. It's a great place to find past presentations, as well as this one in the future. And at any point during the meeting, if you have questions or are being asked a question, feel free to unmute yourself and answer your question or ask the question. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, there is a chat feature in GoToMeeting. Otherwise, we just ask that you please remain muted so that everyone can hear the presentation. At the conclusion of the presentation, there will be a brief survey to gather some feedback on the presentation. If you could please fill that out, that would be greatly appreciated. A summary of that is provided to Sam so he can improve his presentations in the future. A couple of upcoming events that you might want to be aware of. There is a .NET study group that is focusing on Azure websites and cloud services that is meeting virtually on October 26th. There's a link provided on the screen there. Additionally, our friends at the Cleveland C# VB.NET user group will be hosting Jeff Fritz to talk about .NET 7 on October 27th. And now time for the feature presentation.
All right, well, thanks again. My name is Sam Nasr, as Steve mentioned, and we're going to be discussing an overview of Azure Speech Services. A little bit about me. You can find me on Twitter at Sam Nasr. I've been a software developer since 1995, and I'm currently the Senior Software Engineer for NIS Technologies. I've been certified with a few certifications from Microsoft, and one of my favorite things is running the Cleveland C# VB.NET user group, as well as the .NET study group that meets online. I've also been an author for Visual Studio Magazine, and I've been a 5-time Microsoft MVP. A little bit of a shameless plug for the Cleveland C# VB.NET user group. We meet every month. The meetings are free of charge and open to the public, and we cover a variety of topics related to .NET. You can find meeting information posted at meetup.com at the link listed at the bottom of the slide. And so with that, let's go ahead and get started. So if we look at computer input over the past few decades, you can see that the evolution has basically migrated from the old punch card over to the keyboard, which we still use today. And then we got over into swiping and pinching and zooming to better interact with the application and the interface. And now we find ourselves getting into a different realm where we're actually talking to our application. And this is facilitated by Azure Cognitive Services. And as you see there, Azure Cognitive Services is a suite of 5 different services or 5 different umbrella packages. And within each one, there are different subgroups. So within speech, there are 4 different services that are offered within it, as well as in language, vision, decision, and OpenAI service. So needless to say, it's a pretty broad set of products and services that are available. But for tonight, we're only going to be focusing on the speech aspect of it, and specifically the top 3 that you see there: speech to text, text to speech, and then speech translation. And later we'll talk about speaker recognition and why we omitted that. So getting into the thick of it, with speech to text, basically what this does is that it allows us to utilize the pre-built AI models to convert spoken words into text. So we have actual AI models that are built and provided by Microsoft, available within Azure, and then it gives us the ability where we can actually speak into our device and then have that translated into text. This can be done either real time or asynchronously, and we can utilize a microphone, an audio file, or even blob storage of a large audio file that's stored on the cloud. And then once we have that capability, now we can then integrate it into our own custom applications. And so we also have the ability where we can do batch transcription, meaning we can upload a large audio file of a lengthy conversation or a lengthy dialogue, a monologue rather, and then have that transcribed into text. In addition, we can utilize the models that are available within Azure, or we can actually create our own and train it for custom speech models. So this would be handy if you're using specific jargon or anything that's domain specific for a specific type of business. For example, if I'm in the medical field and I use the word defib, obviously you can't find that word in the dictionary, but it is specific only to the medical industry. Likewise, when I say C# for developers or VS, it'll be recognized as Visual Studio. So specific jargon can be trained within the models, and then I can utilize those models. And those models can essentially be used to augment the base model. So the base model will take regular spoken English or whatever language you have it set to by default, and then it will translate the spoken words into text, primarily words that you would find in a dictionary. But again, those custom models can be used to augment that so that it can carry forth domain jargon. And there's a demo web application that's available, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that. We'll open that up in a browser. And let me go ahead and share my browser with you. All right, so now this is the website that I went to. It's a test portal provided by Azure. And I can just simply scroll down, and there I see the ability to try speech to text. So I'll go ahead and click speak. Testing 1, testing 2. And there, as you see, it transcribed the text for me, and it continues to do so until I press the stop button. So how can I integrate this into my application? Before we get into that, let's talk a little bit more about the SDK that's available to us. And let me go ahead and share my screen again. All right, so there's an audio config class that's available, and what this allows me to do is to be able to configure my application to utilize the speech services. So this is essentially provided within a NuGet package that I incorporate into my application, and then I do the necessary configuration, and then I'm off and running. So let's get a better view of that by jumping into a demo. And so the first thing that I need to do is obviously I need to visit my Azure portal. And so I'm already logged in here. What I'm going to do is essentially create a resource, but in order to create a resource, I have to first create a resource group. So let me go ahead and create a resource group and click create. And we'll call this speech demo RG. We'll keep it in the Eastern region. Review and create. And there's my speech services or my speech demo RG. Now, when I open that up, now I want to add the speech services to it. So to do that, click create, and I'm going to search the marketplace for speech services. And of course, when you're looking for something, it's not easy to find. So let's try again. And there's the speech service. I'm going to go ahead and create that. And let's give it a name of speech 1. And we'll stick with the free pricing tier, and then review and create. And now that that's created, it's currently being deployed. And then after it's deployed, essentially, I can go to that resource. And like everything else in Azure, it all revolves around the key points that are provided. So it's giving me keys here with a specific endpoint and the region that I'm going to be accessing, which is Eastern US. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this key, and then I'm going to go over to my application and utilize it. So let's take a look at the code. So once I have these key points, or these keys rather, now I can use them for a variety of different services. So what I did here for security purposes is essentially I put my subscription inside a config file or app.config. And to give you a better overview of what I have, essentially, I have a solution that contains all 4 projects relating to the speech overview services. So we're going to look at speech to text first. And with that, it's a very simplistic application. It's a console application, as they all are actually. And within it is the main method. Within the main, the first thing that I'm doing is I'm obtaining my subscription key, which I already set up in Azure. And I'm getting the region, which I also set up in Azure. I'm storing those in my config file, and then I'm just simply calling them using the configuration manager. From there, I utilize these 2 string values in my speech.config. So now I'm setting up my subscription. And now the next thing that I'm doing is I'm going to utilize the audio config class that I mentioned earlier. So this is where essentially the rubber meets the road. So with the audio config, after instantiating it, what I'm doing here is I'm specifying that it is going to be utilizing from the default microphone input. And to give you an idea of the various settings that are available, I can select from a microphone input, from a default speaker output within my machine. I can select a different microphone input, or a stream, or a different WAV file. So it gives me a lot of flexibility on what I could use for my input. I'm going to keep it for the default microphone. Now I've set my audio config. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize the configuration, the audio config that I just set up, as well as the speech config, which is the instance of this class that utilizes the configuration manager, meaning it utilizes the subscription and the region that I set up. Once I have those set up, then I'm going to enter into an infinite loop where all it's doing is it's specifying how can I help you, and then it's just simply listening for the user to say something. After the user has verbally spoken, then it takes that spoken language, converts it into text, and then we reply back with the result.txt here. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and run it. And we got speech to text. Let's select that as our starting project. And we'll go ahead and click start. We'll give it just a minute to spin up. And then there's my console. And as you can see, it automatically detected my voice when I said, and there's my console, and then it displayed it on the screen. Now I can press enter and go to the next line of text that I want to say. Do you have product ABC in stock? Now, if you notice, I'm asking it, do you have a specific product in stock? Obviously, it's a question, right? It automatically detected that it's a question and appended the question mark at the end of it. If I say something else like, do you have SKU 1, 2, 3 in stock? So here's a little gotcha. Obviously, we have all known SKUs as stock keeping item numbers or stock keeping units. However, here it basically spelled it out as the way it would be found in a dictionary, SKEW, as opposed to the SKU that we're all familiar with. So this is a perfect scenario where I could utilize a custom model to train it to be able to supplement the base model that's already in use. Let's try one more phrase. I'm really happy to be here tonight, aren't you? All right. So there, again, transcribes all the words, things that are abbreviated, any question marks, or any questions rather that are deemed as a question, it automatically appends a question mark at the end of it. So let me pause here and see if there's any questions. Again, feel free to jump in at any point in time, either verbally or through chat. And I don't see anything in chat. No questions so far. Very good. All right, so let's march forward. So some gotchas. Basically, the accuracy depends on ambient noise and or industry or domain specific jargon. So obviously demonstrating this from a quiet office, it's going to be far different than if I'm working in a noisy manufacturing environment. I used very specific words that can be easily transcribed, as opposed to things that included specific jargon or specific industry terminology. So that's one thing to watch out for. Okay, now that's one of the services. The next one that we want to talk about is speech translation. And what speech translation allows me to do is to be able to take speech and to convert that either into speech or into text translation. Meaning I can take the spoken language and then I convert that to either translate it into text or translate it into a spoken language. It'll produce the recognized results depending on the language that I selected. But in addition, I can also translate to multiple target languages. And there's interim recognition and translation results that are also available. But let's go ahead and jump into a demo with that. And again, jumping into our application. So we have the speech translation, similar to the other apps that I created. This is going to be also a console application. And so obviously the entry point is going to be main. We're taking our subscription and our region that we already set up previously, and we're utilizing that in a speech translation config class. Then we take that, and now we're setting our recognition language. What language do we want to recognize? We're looking for English. What language do we want to translate to, or our target? We have Italian, because I'm a big fan of anything Italian. And then just for kicks, we're going to add French on top of the list of different translations that we want to return. We're going to utilize the audio config in the same manner that we did in the previous demo, because this allows us to specify where our source of input is coming from. And so here we're using the default microphone. And so we're using the translation recognizer as the class that actually does the translation. It will take the input and then send it to Azure, translate it, and then send back the result in text. And essentially, we're going to have a while loop again, an infinite while loop, where we're going to be speaking into the microphone first, as you see in this first line. And then we're using the translation recognizer where we're calling recognize once async. So we're going to be taking one phrase and then recognizing that, sending it to Azure asynchronously, waiting for the translation. And then once we get the translation results, now we're going to display it to the user. So you see that we're using the translation recognizer, and sorry, I jumped a little bit ahead of myself. We have the recognize once async, and then from there, we're making a call to the output speech recognition result, which is this method that's defined up above here. And all this is doing is that it's taking the translation result that we got back from Azure, and now we're going to dissect it. So first, we want to see, did the speech translate correctly? So yeah, we do have translated speech. It was a match. We'll go ahead and display the text to the user. And then we want to also check for different scenarios. For example, if there was no match, meaning the user was speaking a lot of mumbo jumbo, couldn't figure out what language that was, then we simply respond back by saying speech could not be recognized. In addition, we also have the option to cancel midstream. And so if that got canceled, likewise, we display that to the user as well. Okay. So essentially, this is where the core of the functionality happens. We're going to listen to the user, and then we're going to make a call to the translation recognizer. Once we get that result back, we're going to dissect it using the output speech recognition result method, which is up here. And then that will display the result to the user. And then it would just simply prompt for enter to continue, and then continue to loop, waiting for additional input. So let's go ahead and run this as well. And we'll change projects. I love pizza. And so there it translated, it recognized the English language, I love pizza. It translated to Italian, adoro la pizza. And in French, j'adore la pizza. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly in both languages. Do you have something else you want to tell me? And again, it recognized it as a question in English, and then translated in both Italian and in French. Okay. All right, let me pause here and see if there's any questions. So far, nothing in chat. All right, so I assume we're good to go. Pardon me. Okay, next is going to be text-to-speech. And what text-to-speech allows us to do is to be able to take real-time speech and, real-time text, and then synthesize that into actual spoken language. So there's asynchronous synthesis of long audio that's available, meaning I can upload a large text file and then get a large audio file back to be able to play that. There are pre-built neural voices, and what's meant by that is that it utilizes AI so that it is not the choppy, robotic voice translated from text, but rather it is fluent English in the same manner that I am speaking to you. Pardon me. And we can utilize fine-tuning text-to-speech output with SSML, or speech synthesis markup language. And this allows us to fine-tune things depending on accents. For example, my wife's real name is Irene as opposed to Irene in English. So I can use SSML to fine-tune those specific words when spoken. All right, and the best way to explain something is through a demo. So let me go ahead and do that. And let's see, we want to go over into our application again. We have text-to-speech. And again, it's a console application like the others. As we step through it, inside of main, like everything else, we get the subscription and the region, and then we set up our speech config class. Then we are setting a voice that we're going to be using, and in this case, it's going to be Jenny Neural. And then we're instantiating the speech synthesizer with the configuration that we set up previously, which is this speech config that utilizes the voice that we want to read back to us, as well as the subscription key and the region. So we're kind of building as we progress down in the code. We get our subscription and region, and then we have our voice, and then we include that all in the speech config and pass that into our speech synthesizer. And then essentially it's the same thing where it's an infinite loop. We're looking for text to be entered in by the user, and then we're going to synthesize that into spoken language, and then just continue to loop. And similar to what we did with the translation, we have an output speech synthesis result. And what this does is it's looking to see that the synthesizing has been completed, meaning that we've submitted the text to Azure. Azure has now translated that into spoken language. And now it'll send us that audio stream where we can actually play it back to the user. So let's go ahead and run a demo. And so we'll do speech to text. Sorry, text to speech rather. And I think for this, I'm going to have to change monitors momentarily because of the audio, just to avoid any issues. So pardon the technical glitches for just a moment. I'm going to unshare and then reshare a different screen. We want monitor 1, include media, and share. All right, now the next thing, we want to bring our application to the foreground. And we have text to speech. And we're going to go ahead and hit play. Enter some text that you want to speak. I love presenting
Azure Speech Services.
Now, first of all, did everyone hear that? I want to make sure the audio came through.
Yeah, I heard it.
Excellent. So as I mentioned earlier, it is the very fluent voice. It is not the robotic voice that we're used to in the past. I can enter in an additional phrase. I typed that in a little too early. Okay, let's do this. Okay, one more time. How can I help you find the product you want?
How can I help you find the product you want?
Unfortunately, you got to type it in at the right time, otherwise it doesn't pick it up. So let's try that again.
It's my pleasure to help our customers.
So again, notice the attenuation in her voice, that it sounds very fluid, very natural spoken language. Any questions? All right, Steve has a question. How well does this product handle inconsistent connections with Azure? For example, if I'm translating a long sentence and my internet connection degrades, does it handle it gracefully? So as you can tell, we were doing it asynchronously. And so we're waiting for the call to essentially respond back from Azure. And so if something happens, if there's something amiss in the connection, then we'll wait until it reconnects, and then we'll be able to get that audio file back. In addition, you can do it where you can do it in batch mode, where you can submit a large file and then get that all in one shot after you're done. So it's not necessarily just text that I'm entering in the keyboard, but rather it can accept a large file, translate that, and then send back an audio file. Does that answer your question, Steve? All right, very good. Any other questions? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and stop that. And then if we move over into our PowerPoint again, And let me go ahead and share my other screen. Okay, so that covers the three different aspects of it. Essentially, what we've done is set up our Azure subscription and our region. We set up our pricing tier, which was free for this demo purpose. And then we were able to utilize that subscription and that region in all three different services. What I did was I kept it in my config file, and then I'm able to call up the different classes, whether I'm translating into a different language or converting text to speech or vice versa. But essentially very easy to set up, very easy to get up and running with it. So what are some advantages? Obviously, if I'm having my application talk to me or vice versa, I'm talking to my application, obviously it improves accessibility specifically for those who are visually impaired. In addition, if I do that, then I'm also making my site or my application ADA or compliant with the American with Disabilities Act or the WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I'm sorry. And then, of course, last but not least, Section 508 compliance. And if you work for any government entity, typically their website needs to be compliant with that so anyone can be able to access it. In addition, if I was to piggyback these services on top of each other, meaning I add in the text-to-speech, or better yet, speech-to-text, then I can take that text that it translated it to, I can look for a certain SKU number, for example, extract that from the sentence, search my inventory, respond back to the user, but now I can take that response and convert it from text to speech. So I go speech to text, I do a lookup in my application, get the result that I want to display back to the user, but instead of just simply displaying it, I can now utilize the text to speech and be able to talk back to my user. What this buys me is complete hands-free interaction with my application. I no longer worry about the user typing something in. And it's not just a wow factor. Keep in mind, there are some industrial type applications where if they're wearing thick gloves, let's say it's in a large refrigerated environment or harsh conditions, and I've seen a lot of users where basically they had to use a pencil to be able to do keystrokes on the keyboard. Now it does away with that. I can literally speak into my application and have it respond back. Likewise, if I need to display a set of instructions to my user, I can have the application read the list of instructions, and before moving on to the next line, I'm just simply waiting to hear back that the user said okay or next, and it will read the next line to them. So again, this is providing hands-free interaction with my application. So it targets those with disabilities, it targets those that are in an environment where they can't necessarily type it in, and of course, it makes it compliant with a variety of different guidelines. Some references, how and why you should use speech to text. I wrote a blog post on that a while ago, and you can find the link for that listed on the slide. Speech services pricing, that's always a big question, and the big answer for pricing is it depends. So within the free tier, you see that you get quite a bit of time and transactions to experiment with, but then you can move on to the next level with the pay-as-you-go. There are different standards as far as the pricing, and again, it depends on your usage and how often and so forth. So that pricing will change depending on the different tiers that you're in. Lastly, supported languages. So there's a variety of different languages that are supported for the translation. And as we had seen earlier, we can actually translate into multiple languages at once for my target. Pardon me. So this makes it usable or makes it accessible to a variety of different users. The question is, are Azure Speech Services a good fit for my organization? If that's something that we can help you with, please feel free to send an email to consulting@nistechnologies.com. I would be happy to evaluate the application in your specific scenario, free of charge and see where this could fit, if it's a good fit. In addition, if you're interested in any courses, I'll offer a variety of courses in both development as well as AI, and you can find those over on the NIS Technologies website. As far as resources, as far as my links, a variety of links available over on Linktree, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn, email, Twitter. Basically, all my social media contacts are available through Linktree/Sam Nasr. Lastly, my email, snasr@nistechnologies.com. You can find me on Twitter @SamNasr, and my blog, as I mentioned earlier, samnasr.blogspot.com. And if you haven't already connected with me on LinkedIn, I invite you to do so. And with that, I thank you all for attending, and let me turn it over to Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. That's good stuff. I do have one question.
Sure.
So as with most things in Azure, you know, they're never quite fully baked. They're always working on something to make it more appealing. Do you know, I mean, what are they working on right now for this? Are you aware of anything? Or is this?
So AI is a constant moving target, and there's always features that are being added. So the latest was OpenAI. They recently released a new version of the form recognizer. But as far as within the speech services, there's nothing new on the horizon that I'm aware of. But that's likely to change in the very near future as well.
Sure, it makes sense.
Now, also, one thing I forgot to mention, we talked about another service, but we didn't get into detail. So speaker recognition. So I have the demo for it here, and however, when I went to use it, you see that there's a couple links listed here. And as stated, this is a gated service. So what speaker recognition does is it allows me to be able to set up a voice profile and be able to say, this is my voice, I am Sam. And so the next time I would speak into it, it will automatically recognize that this is Sam that's speaking. It recognizes my voice pattern. So this is something where for identifying individuals, Microsoft has taken the initiative for AI responsibility, where they want to know why you're using this application and for what reason. Hence the name, a gated service. So you have to submit an application, your intentions, why you're using this, why you want to use it, before they can grant you access to utilizing the speaker recognition. And so there are links available there, and they better describe, as well as the application provided, whether you can submit that and request permission to do so.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I understand this is targeted towards just, you know, straightforward speech recognition and use. Is there any service that kind of goes towards, you know, is the person truthful? Is there any kind of evaluation of that in one of the services?
A lie detector, so to speak?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. So Jennifer Marsman from Microsoft, she did a presentation on this a while ago, a little headset device that basically straps onto the forehead, and it's a little mind-reading device, for lack of a better term. And this allows you to be able to detect if someone is telling the truth or not. I haven't gotten further into it, and outside of contacting Jennifer, probably looking on the Microsoft website to see where that can come in handy, or
Okay,
where
so
you can get started with that, rather.
Yeah, but it's obviously not part of the standard deployment or product.
Right. As you can
Okay.
tell, when they looked at the cognitive services, they just kept it, you know, simple: speech, vision, language, and OpenAI.
I mean, I was being a little facetious, but actually, it would be a valuable service, right? There could be some very legitimate uses for it.
Again, this is where AI responsibility comes into play. I don't know if they require, if that's going to be another gated service or not. And of course, how reliable is it? That's the other question.
Right.
You know, is this something you're going to be using during job interviews? And can you eventually eliminate candidates wrongfully if the results are not accurate?
Yeah.
You know, that's an ethical question.
Right. There are ethics involved as well. Okay.
Yeah. But more importantly, Joel, you don't trust the people around you? Is that why you're asking about this?
I trust everyone now, but you have no way to test that to see if I'm telling the truth. So.
Right. Good answer. Good answer.
Joe, along those lines, I think there used to be at least one that tried to read the emotions of the person speaking and kind of like do an AI analysis around the speech that way. I seem to remember seeing a Jennifer Marsman presentation on that before.
Right.
Not sure if that's still a thing or not, but I know they've dived into several areas like that.
Okay.
Well, that is all I have, actually. So if there's no more questions, we can go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you very much, Sam. Good stuff. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.